This is the Tesoro AI podcast with Darius Gant. AI is changing the world and fast. This episode is coming to you courtesy of Tesoro AI, the #1 recruiting service for software development and AI talent.
All right, Christina, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you joining us on such quick notice.
I love it. We're agile. We're acting with urgency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to first start by talking about your background, right? You've had some impressive experiences from, leadership and executive positions at Slack, Salesforce, board on Rapid7, which I believe is public, and as well as now running LogicMonitor. But would love for you to talk more about kind of your career progression, as well as at what point did AI become a part of kind of your daily professional experience?
Yeah, no, definitely. I've been so fortunate to have, had an incredible career with some amazing companies. And, I'll go back, I guess, a few years back to my college days when I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what that it looks like. And so I was like, what do I like to do? And, I loved STEM, math and science, but I also loved people and business. And so for me, I think it was how do I connect those dots? And that's been really, a guiding principle for me as I think about my career and like when I've made moves and how I kind of operate and lead. And so, when I came into Salesforce in 2002, it was very early at Salesforce. It was about 20 million in revenue, but it was very early in the cloud revolution. And I was so excited about that. I didn't understand, all the specifics of what cloud was, but I understood that it was around, being able to move faster and utilize connecting the dots between business and technology. And that was really the promise Salesforce had, which was, hey, you don't need to worry about, building all of this technology infrastructure. We're going to do that for you. You got to focus on the business. And so that really resonated with me and the different roles I took at Salesforce, which included kind of being at the first pioneering of customer success, which was how do we bring this reality of the value of technology to the customers and to the business. And so I spent 15 wonderful years there, saw a ton of growth and scalability through the IPO and whatnot. And then similarly, got the opportunity at Slack and saw that the world was starting to shift to wanting to be more conversational and bring more emotion into how you connect with data. It was shifting from this system of record to more of this collaboration and conversational aspect. And so that was an incredible opportunity and went in pretty early there to build out the go-to-market and customer-facing teams at Slack. And then Salesforce decided to acquire Slack. And so that's when I made the move to LogicMonitor, because I really saw, again, this new revolution around how the role of the plays into enabling digital transformations and how, really the role of IT is continuing to evolve to connect to the business world. And so that's been really important for me and to age myself as well. I studied industrial engineering in college. And so we were doing machine learning, and stochastic models was at the forefront of my studies back then, almost, over 30 years ago when I started. So it's been around for a while, and just love though how it's taking shape and with the generative side really coming to fruition.
What I think about it is unique about your experiences is kind of you were at those companies at an inflection point for each one of them. So if it's Salesforce, it's no one knew what the cloud is, but now everyone is moving to the cloud. So it's like, oh, I'm here at the right time. And then if it's Slack, it's all right. We were in pre-pandemic world. We would just talk to each other in the office. Microsoft Teams and things like that were still coming about. But when we hit the remote world, it's like this other inflection point. And so to transition that and talk more about your experience now at LogicMonitor, right? AI has been around for decades. People have been practicing with AI models for decades, but you kind of had this unique point that we hit where the cloud became important. Then the big data boom also became important. And then you got GPUs as well. So you got these three kind of factors that come into play. LogicMonitor sits within that ecosystem. We talked a little bit about data centers, the importance of data centers, but I think that becomes a part of kind of, I think people understand the AWS and all of that, but I would love for you to just kind of ground us in, the ecosystem and where data centers really become important as we talk about this overall boom in AI.
Yeah, so I try to kind of explain this to my family members who are like, "What do you do? Why do you do this?" In simple
Oh,
terms.
by the way, I saw something. I forget what company it was, but they went around asking their employees, "What is the cloud?" And everyone had to kind of think of it off the top of their head, and everyone had a different answer. Eventually, got to a good answer, but folks had to let me think about what do I actually? How do I explain this?
We did something similar where we went around and asked all of our executives' children to describe what LogicMonitor does, and that was a fun exercise as
Mhm.
well. But, if you think about, when cars came about, everyone's like, great, we have these cars, but do we have the infrastructure to support the cars driving? We moved from these horse and carriages, and now there needed to be a way to kind of connect cities and get the flow of the cars with this new speed and urgency that cars could operate within. So highways were built and bridges were built. And so I think of data centers like highways, right? They're the highways of the modern digital world. And so AI is like the car that's driving on them. They're moving so fast, and you need to be able to connect this data that's coming in so rapidly and coming in so fast. And that gets connected with data centers. So data centers are like these highways that are enabling the movement of goods. Data centers are enabling the movement of data and connecting systems, people, technology. And so if you're not maintaining these data centers and if they're not up and running, just like if a highway has got potholes or a lane is broken down, you get mass chaos, you get gridlock, nothing can move, nothing can flow, and everything starts to fail to function, and it has a real impact on everybody's everyday lives. And the same is true with these data centers. They're, at the epicenter of AI. And if they're not flowing or not moving, systems go down. And when systems go down, that can affect everything, from being able to fly on your plane when, some of the airlines had the outages over the last couple days, or last couple years, to being able to buy your holiday gifts. And so all of those things are really important. So, data centers are really the epicenter of AI.
Yeah, and just to kind of set up, where Logic Monitor is really adding value to the data center. So if we think about historically, folks had software. I mean, there were basically on-premise solutions. Then we moved to the cloud. What was the value for companies, individuals to be working out of the cloud versus working on-prem?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were talking earlier about how I joined Salesforce in 2002, and we spent our entire, first kind of 10 years trying to explain, what the value of the cloud was and get people's arms around that. But it's not a destination, right? It's a
Mhm.
continuum. And so as you think about not just AI, but the digital kind of innovation that needs to be prepared, you need to think through what is best around how we manage these data centers. So not everything is best served in the cloud. Not everything's best served on premise. Not everything's best served in AWS versus Azure. And so companies are really thinking through, like, what is their strategy around the data centers and what does that mix look like?
Right.
And they're looking at it from multiple lenses, like, what's going to give me the greatest performance? How do I optimize across cost, right? Because cost
Mhm.
is a huge piece. And now sustainability. I mean, data centers require massive amounts of energy and power to operate. And so what does that footprint,
Right.
look like? And so the companies are thinking through these kind of three things, these performance, cost, and sustainability, and trying to balance that with the levels of innovation that they need. And so at LogicMonitor, we're kind of able to help them think through that. And we're, first and foremost, ensuring that their footprint that they have stays up and running, and that performance is there. But we also have all of this data around how companies, are utilizing the multifaceted of data centers. And so we can derive insights and help them think through how they manage across that.
If you're a hiring manager and you appreciate the unique skill sets required to build AI solutions, then I would highly suggest you get your hands on our AI talent salary guide. As you know, one of the greatest challenges in building AI products is acquiring the right team. Over 100 plus pages, we dive deep into our global AI talent acquisition strategies. And with our networks in Latin America, we also provide you with actionable advice on how you can scale up your AI team cost efficiently. Once you explore our AI talent acquisition strategies, you'll never look at hiring the same way again. Links are in the description. Awesome. And you mentioned if we're looking at this as a highway, right? And you got these companies who are trying to deliver AI solutions to their customers. What is it that causes the traffic jams? What is it from a performance perspective? What are the issues that companies run into with their data center that really impacts performance?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like highways, right? Like everything's coming at you and it's getting even worse, right? So, data's coming from all these different sources. And so, especially as companies are thinking through their data center strategy and they're having these, multiple on premise sites, they're having multiple cloud vendors, it's coming from so many different sources. And so when that happens, there first and foremost, there can be errors that happen in just the coding of how that data is getting brought together. And so there's these operational issues. And so we call them IT operational issues. So those types of things can create an anomaly, which then ultimately either slows your system down or it can bring it down to a halt. And if you think of the CrowdStrike
Oh, yeah.
incident that happened just a couple months ago, which on a side note, we saw that happen because all of a sudden my CTO calls me. He's like, I don't know what's going on, but all of our customers are having, some issue across them. And then, we realized that there was this CrowdStrike outage because everyone was being affected by it. But that was just simply, someone manually made a mistake with how they deployed the software. And so those
Mhm.
types of things happen all the time.
Yeah. And if I have an AI solution and I'm, trying to deliver that to my customers, what are the things that I think about from a cost perspective? Why is that, or what are the major issues that I come across from a cost perspective?
A huge company, but I think about all the number of apps and systems and data that we have at LogicMonitor. And you think about these large companies, like that's just, it's huge. They've got thousands and thousands of them. And it's growing, right? Every single day, there's something new that we need digitized to enable. And so, this growing surface area, you have to really think through like how do you prioritize and what are those workloads, if you will, what are best served. And so if you say, all right, everyone goes from San Francisco to Tahoe in the winter, you need a really high powered highway, right? It
Mhm.
needs to have all the bells and whistles. But you know what? Maybe when folks are going from, San Francisco, up the coast to go get oysters and in Hogs Island, that traffic's not that high. The weather's usually pretty good. You don't get snow and rain. And so you don't need to build this incredible highway. It actually can be fine, with having something a little less. And so that's how companies are thinking about their data centers. They're saying what needs the high powered and what maybe doesn't. And then they're all, they're looking at all of that and saying, how can I run this more efficient? Can I run this type of stuff more efficiently? Or do I need to use a third party to outsource it? And so those are the types of things that they're looking through.
And is that an ongoing, like, is that an issue that companies deal with on an ongoing basis, or is that kind of something you can plan up front? They kind of maybe they know their use cases for the AI or what they'd be, the data they'd be running through the data center. So I'm curious whether it's something that you're saying, hey, we plan for this up front, we'll get you the right answer up front, or it's over time, those needs evolve, those challenges evolve from a cost perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think they completely evolve over time, which is why, it's a continuum, not a destination. I mean, the world's changing so fast and the digital world is changing so fast. And so you're constantly looking at and evaluating what's that right mix and what's the prioritization around how you do that and how you manage that.
Yeah. And you also mentioned from a energy perspective, which I think is a very interesting conversation around AI. You get those kind of clips of how much energy maybe a open AI GPT, like how much energy it takes. But your perspective on energy, right? You mentioned this is one of the core things that you assist the companies with, but we'll love more insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real, topic. And while we're not, ourselves going out and developing and building data centers, we're
Hmm.
certainly partnered with organizations that are looking at that. Like, where do these data centers get built here in the U.S. or even globally? Like, where's the real estate for that? Where are those resources to power this? Do we have enough? Resources. How do we look at alternative energy as well? And that's a real thing. And it's a real topic of conversation, I think, at all levels from the government through all these corporations is how are we going to fuel this AI revolution? How are we going to build this infrastructure, these highways that are required for it? And so we're certainly partnering with companies around, how they're thinking about developing it. So then once those are developed, we can monitor, again, just not only the performance and the cost implications, but we can monitor what is the environmental and sustainability impacts that these data centers are having.
Yeah, so it sounds like, in terms of just your ability to add value to your customers, there's a few different routes that you're going. I'm curious, especially as we talk about digital transformation, you've got a lot of organizations who are kind of going through that process, who have started that process, and even organizations who are like non-technical organizations. But now it's, hey, we need to be implementing software both internally, maybe we have some ideas externally. As they think about this process and you have conversations with them, what are some of kind of the ROI metrics that you speak to as you talk about LogicMonitor and the value that you all provide? Are there specific metrics that you state?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like the first thing that we do and our core primary responsibility is to ensure that the performance of these data centers, right? Again, it doesn't matter what if you're on-prem, in the cloud, combination of that. We want to ensure that your entire data center stack is performing. So it's up and running and it's
Mhm.
performing at the right speed. And so we have implications around mean time to resolution. So
Mm.
if there's an issue, how fast can you solve that issue? And if you think about like these needle in the haystack, before companies have Logic Monitor, it takes them hours, days. We had a customer who literally had an issue that they couldn't solve or find for 3 years. And they got Logic Monitor. And within 3 days, they found the issue. And immediately, and they had hundreds of people on calls because they have all these different people from all this, the different groups who are managing this. And so Logic Monitor was able to pull all that together, find the issue immediately.
Mm.
That mean time to resolution is really important because one, it keeps your systems up and running. So,
Right.
and two, when you're not spending all this time finding the needle in the haystack, then you can focus on more strategic and innovative areas. So not only are we helping you find, have less issues, then if you do have an issue, find it quickly so you can resolve it or the system automatically resolves it. But then now you're freed up to do all these strategic things and you can start to connect the dots between the performance of your data centers to your business. And
Mhm.
so you can actually say when our data centers are up and running, we have a large healthcare provider. They're like, when our data centers are up and running, when our MRI machines are
Mm.
up and running, we have to turn away less surgeries, right? Or we have, Top Golf, they say when our bays are up and running, people spend more money and we don't have to turn as many people away. They don't have to wait as long because they're up and running. So we can start to make those connections.
Yeah, and I love the example you use, and we'll go with Top Golf.
Everyone loves
And maybe I don't need you to. Maybe you don't speak specifically to what Top Golf had done historically, but what I'm curious about is prior to LogicMonitor, there was some MTTR that the company had. You mentioned 3 years to 3 days. What did people do historically to solve the issues that they had with the data center?
I mean, it was chaos. They have hundreds of people working on this. And, that company I was describing, like they said, literally, they have 125 people on a call. And everybody's looking around, like pointing fingers, like, I don't know, it's not my issue. I don't think it's my issue. I think it's your issue. And like nobody's on point. Nobody knows where to look. And so these hundreds of people are all searching in this haystack for the needle or all of their individual haystacks. And so it's a real issue if companies don't have LogicMonitor. It's a real issue to the success of their company, because if they can't find the issue, then they're not enabling their business. Their systems are down, or they're performing slowly, and that's having an impact on revenue, on customer experience, and then it's having an impact on efficiency. So you've got to have all these hundreds of people just looking for it versus those hundreds of people doing more strategic areas, right? And working on more strategic things for your organization.
Yeah, and I imagine there's some element of integration, right, of LogicMonitor into the customer. Like, what does that look like in practice? Given that you've got this element of the data center, you also got the company on the other side, you got their terminals. Like, what does that look like to integrate into that entire workflow?
Yeah, and that's where, our platform is so differentiated, is that we've pre-built 3,000 integrations to every permutation that can exist in a company's environment. So whether they're using, really legacy network and, data centers there, like we've got all of that pre-built, or if they're using AWS or Microsoft Azure, we have all of those integrations pre-built. So we can organically extract all this data and pull it into the single pane of glass that's LogicMonitor. And so we actually extract over 1 trillion metrics a day. And so if you think about that, it's like massive. Like X or Twitter does like 1/100th of that, right? And so just to put it in context, so we're extracting all of this data natively and organically in customers' environments. We're pulling it all into LogicMonitor, so it's in this single spot. And then we're using, machine learning and stochastic models, which is a part of AI on top of that, to look for those anomalies so that we can predict issues before they happen. And so that's really, the advantage that we have.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you guys are all a part of the ecosystem that allows companies that are building not just AI, but I just like to use that because that's what we talk about here, but
Yeah.
building and deploying AI products. You're allowing them to remain functioning, but you yourself are also using AI to deliver your product. You mentioned the amount of data, the amount of metrics you see, the anomaly detection, right? So curious, how does the AI work? Like, what is the AI actually doing? The AI product you have, what is it actually doing to solve the problem?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple levels that it's doing. So, the first is that it's looking for these anomalies. So it's the prediction, right? So it's
Mhm.
saying, how do we predict where something could be going wrong? The second is that it actually correlates that data. So it looks for predictions, but then it combines and correlates predictions that could be happening when saying, all right, we've got 10 issues happening over here that are all very similar, right? So that we can correlate, and then you can kind of strategically look at solving it versus just solving these, we call them alerts, these alerts on this one-off basis, right? So we predict, then we correlate it. And then now with the evolution of generative AI, we
Hmm.
can summarize those alerts in a natural text language. And then you can ask questions of it. So now you think about it is like the type of person that can use LogicMonitor be more of a business person because it's in a natural language rather than in
Right.
node 2.3. We've got an issue over here, right? It's saying actually, hey, we're seeing that maybe this data center is getting old and resilient. We've had 30 issues come up around this particular node, and it's probably time to upgrade that within the next year or two. So now, and then someone could say, well, do you think I could push it off for,
Mm.
18 months? And you can start to converse and have questions around that at a more strategic level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think Gen AI has been huge just because a lot of the applications, to your point, are able to take something that was specifically in the realm of someone who was very technical. What is it? IT ops were historically
Yeah.
had to look at the alerts. And then it brings it down to someone who is more not so technical, but just understands the business, right? I like to use the example of runway ML, right? And you can create videos using their platform, generative AI based videos using their platform. You used to have to do that. You used to have to be very technical as an editor, video editor type, but now you could use natural to then go ahead and communicate. So now on behalf of your customer, if I'm Top Golf, it's like, oh, okay, well, I can have my IT ops folks focus on higher, higher priority problems, and we could have some of our business users kind of turn their attention to and use Gen AI to fix the existing problems that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I get really excited about is the IT operations role and kind of the way that they play. And so even as the folks that have historically been in that role are saying, "Hey, I've got to be more business centric." And so if you think about like I was, going back to that customer analogy where, there's hundreds of people on a call and they're like spending their days searching and if you think about it, they're getting yelled at, right? Like they're literally in
Yeah.
like a dark room, back room, like in a closet of a company, and they don't know there's an issue. Someone calls them and is like, I have an issue. And they're on their heels and they're like spending all their time searching for it frantically and they're just reacting. Well, now we've given them the tools with Logic Monitor to either not have an issue because it
Mhm.
automatically solves it, or if there is one, they see it quickly, they can solve it quickly. And so now they have this time and they're the ones that are on the forefront saying, hey, we've got an issue, we're on it, we're solving it, or we don't have any issues. So let me tell you how the impact of this not having issues, how that's affecting our core business. So they're shifting from this like back office, on your heels to going into the boardroom and saying, hey, here's how we're running the business. We now, if you think about Topgolf, they use something called a player experience score. That's kind of their core business metric at
Mhm.
Topgolf,
Mhm.
which is, an algorithm of revenue and customer experience and all and their, return, how often their loyalty to Topgolf. And so now they're saying, hey, we have this direct impact on it. And here are the things we're doing that are supporting player experience score. So their role has shifted quite a bit in freeing up into this more strategic, more innovation focus. And so we're enabling that through not only the products that we're providing, but we're also giving them, enablement around the skills and how they can bring those insights to their company. And so I get really excited
Mhm.
about that transformation.
When you're serving up those insights, I imagine there's kind of some interface that you're providing, or correct me if I'm wrong, to your customers. We talked about ITOps folks and business folks being able to use Gen AI to view, kind of to, basically to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Is that the case, or is it someone on the side of Logic Monitor that's doing that?
No, that's what they're doing, themselves. I mean, Logic Monitor, we have Edwin, which is we, call the IT ops agent, kind of your super agent. So Edwin can, correlate and summarize that and then eventually can actually, troubleshoot some of these issues through automation.
Hmm.
So we certainly are doing some of that, but it really is this kind of IT ops agent slash teammate to the IT ops people at the company's site. And so we're freeing them up from having to do a lot of that, because they've got this agent, but they're still, in charge of managing that environment.
Right. I think Gen AI has been, at least at a consumer level, folks were able to adopt it very quickly, right? And you only have one person to ask and maybe a credit card to put in, right? But then if we think you go up to larger organizations, you have a lot of folks still trying to figure out how do we actually leverage Gen AI. So you all created Edwin. Did you run into any of that where companies just had questions, around, because now they got, both business folks and their IT ops folks able to input prompts, receive data back. Were there any issues that you ran into, or just specific types of questions that you needed to walk customers through as they thought about using a Gen AI tool that you were providing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still in the early innings of this, right? Like the workforce is still, figuring out how do we interact with AI? How do we interact with these agents? And so that's certainly top of mind for me as a CEO. Not only how are we helping our customers with this, with our products and being the IT operations agent, but also how all of our employees and workforce is thinking about the agents that they're using, across their functions. And so, we're in the early innings and we're working with companies, both holistically. We have a really strong community group where we bring our customers
Mhm.
together where they can talk about these problems, they can share best practices. We're giving skills and enablement around how they think about that and how they elevate themselves into some of these business schools skills. And then, again, we're creating enablement on our products so that they can understand how they can get the most value from LogicMonitor so they can free up their time.
Yeah. Have they had any thoughts around kind of just hallucinations, right? So with Logic Monitor, I mean, performance is huge, right? So you've got what Logic Monitor is creating in its core product. Then you've got also the Gen AI. Now I'm Top Golf. I have one of my employees using Edwin, but I've heard about this thing called hallucinations with Gen AI. Has that been a topic of conversation? I'm curious if you guys have figured, obviously have figured out a way around it.
Well, it's also about the data that you have. That we have the data that's coming directly from the company's environment and we're getting that natively. And so I think that's so important is that we have that context around the data and we understand the data. And so that allows us to be, so much more accurate in our predictions and
Mhm.
summarizations because of that context and that, organic data that we have. So we've been fortunate that, we don't have those challenges because we're utilizing this direct customer data. But I think, what's important is we learn as well on the customer's data. So we're getting that feedback from the IT operations persona and how they're solving these issues. We're getting that feedback from them and we're integrating even with third party tools where they're
Mhm.
solving the issues. So whether that's a ServiceNow or a Salesforce, and we're bringing that back in. And so we're constantly learning from it and interacting with these folks. And so they're building up their confidence. And as they're building up their confidence, they're saying, okay, great, these are the areas that we would like to start to automate because we have the confidence in those prediction models. And so that's something that's going to just keep evolving and we're just going to get better and better with that.
Okay, okay. A couple questions for you. Maybe a step away from Logic Monitor, but probably also have some tangible experiences you tapping into as well. But this conversation around kind of upskilling within AI, we think a lot about the automation, the efficiency that AI is going to create, in this new wave of tools that are coming out. How have you thought about upskilling for folks who aren't necessarily that tech savvy from like a machine learning perspective, from a coding perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is so exciting. I mean, there's like all this, news, AI is going to replace jobs. I'm like, no, it's not going to replace jobs, but it is, the workforce and the skills required are going to change, and
Mhm.
everybody's going to become a manager, if you will, right?
Right.
And so, there's lots of conversations around what these agents are, and I don't want to go like too far off the reservation, but I do believe that these everyone's going to have this agent that's like working on behalf of you. And so,
Mhm.
Christina, I'm going to have this agent that's able to do a lot of stuff, and that's going to elevate me. And it's like I'm managing my agent. So I think that requires different skills. It requires a different mindset in how you're thinking about things. And so we've got to help people kind of understand that. And so, I mentioned a lot of the things that we're doing externally to help the IT operations, because now they've got
Mhm.
LogicMonitor agents, acting on behalf of them. And so how do they have that mentality? How can they get the most out of, Edwin, our IT ops agent, but how do they think about, how they talk about their work, and how do they bring these messages, like I said, into the boardroom versus,
Right.
just being in this back office system. And a lot of that also is this mentality and confidence in being able to do so. So I love bringing people together to talk about that, highlighting, real stories and use cases is critical. And then we're doing that with our own employees. We're saying, hey, there's this new way of operating, and this is really exciting. And this is an opportunity for people to become, great, to change their careers, change their lives. This is really, really exciting time that we're all living in.
Yeah, I sat on an interesting, basically a seminar, 1 hour seminar with Ali Faye Miller. She's awesome within this AI space, but just talking about AI agents. And one of the things, as I'm looking into these agents, there are some that do require, hey, look, if you want to use this agent, you need to know Python so that you can actually have the agent work the way you want it. However, there are also tons of startups, tons of organizations building AI agents themselves. For you, I guess, what do you think are the core skills to be able to at least manage an agent? Not necessarily go out and build one, because I do think there are a lot of people who are like, hey, look, I'm beyond the point where I want to go learn the code. Okay. So
Yeah.
if I want to be managing agents, where should I focus my attention?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just last week at something similar with McKinsey, and I'm going to get it wrong, but they had like kind of three things. They're like, are you a maker, a taker? And I am blanking on the third one. But so to your point, like not everyone's going to be, building the agents themselves, but you have to be kind of a maker and a creator of your skills, right? And so I think that's, an important skill to think about, which is how can I, create something new? And how do I build, not necessarily building the coding of the agent, but how am I building my function that I'm responsible for? So if you're an
Mhm.
IT ops, it's like, how am I building the connection to solving issues and what that means for our company and what's most important for our company? So
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
you're at Topgolf and it's about in creating these player experiences and joy, like how am I, in my job helping create that? Or if you're in healthcare and you're literally trying to ensure that as many people can have surgery so that their health is improved, like how am I in my IT ops role kind of building and creating that function, and how can I do even more? And so being able to kind of think about that, how you're creating and connect the dots to what your company's core mission is,
Mhm.
and be this, growth mindset or this
Yeah.
continuous learner is so important. And I know that gets like as contrived a lot, but it's actually really true, right? Because these models are learning, and you've got to give feedback, and you've got to be asking questions of the data, and then, giving that feedback. So you're constantly elevating, and you're constantly learning, and your agents constantly learning right there with you.
Yeah, I love that growth mindset. For me, curiosity has just been a huge thing. Like, you understand that agents could potentially save you days, months of work, and whatever your work responsibility is could save you a bunch of time. But curiosity from the perspective of experimentation, right? Because if I'm going to try to introduce an agent that increases productivity 2%, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if we're talking about 100%, right, that may make a lot of sense, and based on using some of the platforms. So just thinking about, okay, well, how much impact is it going to drive on my day to day versus just going out there and using whatever tools that seem, exciting in the moment.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And it forces you to think about, yeah, like your behaviors too, right? Like how you want this feedback loop is really important, that like you're curious and you're learning, but you're also telling and giving feedback around like, here's how I want you to act, agent, right? Like you're like it's like if you had an employee and you're training them and you're saying, here are the things I need you to do, but here's also like how I want you to do that, I think is really interesting as well. So that you're giving that feedback and this agent really is starting to act on behalf of you.
Yeah, I'm going to shift gears here, but one of the questions that I had on my mind was, LogicMonitor started AI first, but how do you, with all of the different use cases of AI that are out there, how do you all decide? All right, we're not going to build everything, right? But here are the core AI use cases that we want to focus the team. How do you focus the team on what you're going to actually put time and effort into?
Yeah, I mean, we're super customer centric. And, I mentioned earlier, like my background has all been built on in kind of the customer success, customer experience world. So I'm
Hmm.
a big believer of everything we do it with the customer at the center of it. And so we're solving real world problems with our customers and we're co-innovating with them. And so we're not, waiting and building something in isolation. Like we're saying, okay, here, you've got a problem. Let's build it, let's get it in your hands, and let's, iterate on this. And so I think that's really important, but we're doing that around the IT ops persona. And that's, really our core. So we're not trying to spread ourselves thin and tackle, all these different roles or personas, but we're really focused on how can we enable the IT ops persona and the work that they're doing. And so it started, with these data centers being at the core. And,
Hmm.
it started with, hey, how can we just, monitor the performance? But then the IT ops folks said, okay, well, that's great. But now, I'm being asked to also be more strategic in how we build and manage our data center strategy. So can you give me more insights around that? And we said, of course. And so we started to build some of our cost optimization tools and our sustainability tools. And then they said, all right, now, we're building a lot of stuff with the LLMs and we need to monitor those as well, as the part of the data center. It's like another component. And we said, great, yes, we can go build that. And then they said, you know what, now I'm being, called into the boardroom and I need to be able to talk about how this is not only, saving us time and money
Hmm.
and, from an efficiency, but I also need to say how we're impacting revenue and experiences. And so we said, all right, great. We'll create the service insights product where we can help, connect those dots for you. And so, we're taking it every step of the way. And then we launched Edwin, where we're finding these, IT ops agent. And we just launched that in June. And now a lot of our customers are using it and they're like, I really like this. This is actually really working. So it would be great if you could automate some of this. And so then we started putting some of the automation into our tools. So we're really doing this with our customer, with that IT ops persona, with what are their challenges and how is their role evolving, and kind of leaning in with them on that.
And is that where the community, because you did mention a community before, is that where that comes into play, where you're able to bring these personas together, talk about potential solutions, and then basically after that, they can validate whether it's something they actually want to buy and use before you're out there, spending time and resources with your tech team trying to build.
Yeah, I mean, we have multiple layers of connecting our customers and getting feedback from our customers. So we have a community where we bring all of our IT ops customers together. And,
Mhm.
not only are we getting feedback from them at a macro level, but they're able to talk to each other, which I think is so important because, we don't have all the answers. We want them to be able to connect with each other. And then we have different advisory boards as well, which are smaller groups of folks, based on different cohorts, whether it be industry or kind of the exact kind of level they are in their organization, size of the organization, how they're, where they are in their maturity with managing it. And we go deeper dive with that. We had our customer advisory board for a 2-day offsite last month. And we spent 2 full days just diving in with them, understanding their challenges, showing them how we were thinking about things, having this 2-way dialogue. We do surveys. We have, a full customer experience team that works with our customers day in and day out. So there's so many different ways that we're working with them and getting this feedback, both from a macro level as well as kind of an individual one-on-one perspective.
Awesome. Yeah. Very clear that I'm talking to someone who's a customer minded first.
Yes.
Great answer. Great
My
answer.
DNA runs deep.
I know we're coming up on time here, but I did want to leave some time for you just to talk about, anything coming up. We're nearing the end of the year. Anything in 2025 we should be looking at coming from LogicMonitor. Also, any announcements that you would like to make? The floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, we just announced a couple weeks ago that we raised $800 million dollars at a $2.4 billion valuation. So we're so
Congrats,
excited about
unicorn
that.
status.
Yes. I mean, it's really exciting. And it's exciting because it's not only a testament to kind of the work that we've done and the impact we've had with our customers, but also kind of where we're positioned for the future. And so that confidence in, lots of investors kind of putting the money where the mouth is exciting, but that's going to allow us to really, expand. And so I think there's kind of 3 key areas that you're going to see us kind of move even further into. And the first is, what I spent talking about is really, being the key manager of the modern data center. And that's our bread and butter. And so we're taking that to more regions, more verticals. And so just being able to expand our kind of core mission, accelerate getting that in the hands of more companies. And so you'll see us do more of that. And then the second is Edwin, right? We really are the IT ops agent. And so we're going to continue to innovate there. We're getting more and more customers, but we're building more and more functionality around the automation, around our integrations to feed those feedback loops into Edwin. And so we'll continue to accelerate there. And then third is our ecosystem. And so, we're continuing to build partnerships through these key players and really kind of extending our ecosystem and reach with, strategic players as well as, channel partners on the sales side. So it's a very exciting time for us. And you can see I'm so passionate about what we're doing. And God, we're all so lucky to be, alive during this exciting, AI revolution or the age of AI, whatever you want to call it, because this is just such an exciting moment for all of us. And I'm thrilled to be at LogicMonitor where we can have a huge impact on this as well.
Absolutely. And I feel fortunate to be able to sit down and talk to folks like yourself who are on the cutting edge. I always have to kind of ground myself and say, focus, because there's so many exciting things happening in this space right now. And I try to tell all of my friends, pay attention, at least to the very basics of what's happening in AI. But definitely want to thank you for spending time today. I know we covered a lot, everything kind of from why data centers are important all the way through agentic AI and even the fundraising. So I appreciate you for sharing so much information. And then also want to congratulate you and the team for the raise, for the valuation, and all the awesome things that you have that are coming up in 2025.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all the work you're doing and kind of, bringing this message out to market.
My pleasure.